Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to everybody who has joined us for this latest Same Old Arsenal podcast. It's me, Suburban Chris, Suburban Gooner Chris, even. Can't even say my own name. Joining you again for our second of our summer series. Now, we're going to be running throughout the summer with this series, and essentially, we're going to do between 30 to 45 minutes max, as we're going to do that every week. If you weren't here last week and you're joining us for the first time, thank you very much for joining us. I'll introduce my guests in a second, but first, before I do that, I'll talk about the concept or theme of today, although I suspect we'll probably, given the time of recording and the fact that there's been some news from Mr. Ornstein about a certain Kai Havertz, we'll probably do 5-10 minutes of that before we get into the stuff. So if you are in the chat, thank you very much for joining us. Please make sure that you pop any questions. We'll have 5-10 minutes at the end. You can ask any questions to our guests if you so wish. Thank you very much to my guests for joining me. As I said, what I'll do before I'll intro them is just talk about the concept. So tonight's podcast is one in, one out, and one bangs. So the premise is that you, our two guests, have saved Mikel Arteta's kids from being run over. They have stopped them in the car. Mikel Arteta has said, "Thank you so much. And as a reward for saving my kids, I'm going to grant you some wishes." And those wishes are, you can have any one player you want. Keep it real, lads. Let's not have Kylian Mbappe chat. You can have any one player joining us this season. You can have any one player out of the squad this season. And then just out of it, just for fun, you can tell me who you think might bang for next season. To go on this lovely escapade and to chat through that, and probably Kai Havertz first, I'm going to welcome first and foremost Akhil from the Arsenal Supporters Trust. How you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, very good. Evening to everyone watching.
You melting a bit in this lovely weather that we've got?
You know, I was at the cricket last week. So, I mean, I am brown. I am from an Indian background, but I'm even more brown at the moment after spending 4 or 5 days in the sun. So, yeah, I've actually enjoyed staying in for a few days and doing a bit of work, to be honest.
Yep, get that aircon on, or get those fans are blaring. I was in Sainsbury's at the weekend, exactly. And they've just piled them high like some sort of Black Friday sale in the Sainsbury's around the corner from me. But we're not here to talk about my random shopping exploits. We are here to talk about Arsenal, and the second person I'll be doing that with is fabulous Merv Dinnen. How are you doing, Merv? You all right? You're on mute, mate. Ding ding ding.
Right, I'm doing good, Chris. How are you? Start again.
Yeah, not bad.
I'm off of mute now. I don't know, for people who know me, hopefully I've asked a lot of people to join in tonight. I know Chris through work. I'm a writer analyst around the HR space and have a podcast called HR Means Business. But I'm lifelong Arsenal. My father was taking me from age 3 or 4. And I've been going ever since, effectively. And I'm wearing a North London Forever t-shirt.
Oh, very nice. On brand. Getting on brand for Lewis Dunford. He will be happy. He will be happy if he listens to the show. That is. Hello to everyone in the chat before we get kicked off for the evening. Carl, Karen, Phil, PG. Who else we got? Paul. Hello to you guys. And as I said right at the beginning, if you want to pop any questions in the chat, we will get to that by the end. Now, before we get into the actual one in, one out, and one bang session, let's have a little chat about the rumour that has circulated. Well, I guess you can question how much of a rumour it is when it's Mr. David Ornstein that has delivered the news. I'm going to start with you, Akhil. Just some initial thoughts. We won't dive into lots of details, but the tweet that Mr. Ornstein put out 3 hours ago, Arsenal have made proposal to sign Kai Havertz. Pursuit ramped up in recent days. Contact with Chelsea and 24-year-old FC Bayern also keen. 2 years left, so Chelsea will ideally renew or sell. And Arsenal are planning a formal offer for West Ham for Declan Rice soon. Just some initial thoughts on that Kai Havertz rumour.
Yeah, I think it's. I've seen the word early, so it's an early proposal, and I think it's quite well known how Mikel Arteta and they do work. You know, they have several lists. They have a list 1, list 2, list 3, list 4, and ideally it's list 1 that they want. Then they'll move on to list 2, list 3. So, but I would very much doubt Kai Havertz was on that list 1. But I would say because of Chelsea's situation, because they have to get rid of players, they have to get people off their wage bill. There's an opportunity there. So I think it's not just going to be Arsenal. There's going to be a lot of clubs sniffing around Chelsea because if Man United don't give the 80 million for Mason Mount and it drags on, that's another player still on their wages. They haven't offloaded, and they might be then tempted to offload a Kai Havertz. So I think it is early. I think Arsenal have seen a bit of an opportunity, same way they saw it with Jorginho in the winter. And potentially, if the opportunity is there, it's clear Mikel does like Kai Havertz. He does fit the profile at 24 years old. But I can see this one either ending very quickly, like Arsenal have, kind of walked away within a couple of days, or I can obviously see it maybe even wrapping up very quickly, because as I said, Chelsea do want to get players off the books for them to get players in. So I think that's kind of where we are with Kai Havertz. Good player, lots of potential. I think has been sort of, he's played for Chelsea at a time when he's had 4 or 5 managers in that time. How can any player really settle? So it'll be interesting to see kind of where he ends up. Obviously, Bayern Munich, he's a German international. A lot of German players do want to play at Bayern Munich. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's kind of how I kind of look at it at the moment.
So does that mean you're sitting on the yes, please let him sign, let him sign, or the I'm not really that fussed, or the no way in a million years?
I'm not really that fussed, really, because I feel we'll have other targets. But I feel this is probably a target that we think we can maybe get a little bit cheaper, which then means potentially spending a little bit more elsewhere. It is interesting that it's kind of a case of Chelsea do want him to re-sign, and they'll only sell him if he's not re-signing. Usually, certainly historically, when Arsenal are going for players, we're sort of going for players that nobody really wants and the club want to sell. So the fact that actually Chelsea ideally want to keep him, it tells me that there's definitely a player in there somewhere, and we are slightly shopping in that kind of upper market now. But am I? Yes, no. I wouldn't say either. I would say I'm on the fence. If it happens, great. I've got a lot of faith in Mikel, as not just a manager but as a coach to improve players. So we'll sort of see what happens.
Yeah, I think for me, I am sitting on the not fussed side of the fence, or I'm sitting on the don't really want him side of the fence, but that's mainly because I've looked at some of the numbers, some of the stats. He's got something like 13 goals, I think it was. I did tweet it earlier, in like 3 seasons. He's not exactly a prolific goal scorer. He's not a prolific assister. In terms of missed chances, I saw an Orbinho stat earlier, and I'll bring you in on this, Merv, now, just for your thoughts. I saw an Orbinho stat earlier, and he was the second least prolific striker in the Premier League for his reported XG. So he's not really a target man, because Chelsea have used him as a striker, and I was looking at a few Chelsea feeds, and they're not really, talking. They're saying he's been underused. He's not been used properly because they're playing him as a centre forward, and that was something that maybe we're going to get into that when we go into the 1 in, 1 out, and 1 bangs. But just some initial thoughts from you before we get into that first one. And sorry, just before you answer, Phil Macker in the chat has said, "Can anyone tell me, is bang meant to be good or bad?" It's meant to be good, Phil. So to absolutely explode on the scene. That's what it's meant to. That's what it's meant to be next season. But yeah, bang means good. We'll get to that towards the end. But Merv, some thoughts on Kai Havertz, please.
He's not somebody I'd given any thought to, really. I've seen him, to me, as a player for Chelsea who's possibly, underperformed. Maybe they haven't got the best out of him. Maybe it was part of a buying sweep. And they maybe, I have seen some stuff online with people saying that Mikel Arteta will get the best out of him. He's obviously got a specific role in mind. But as you say, the stats, and I've looked at the stats on Twitter as well, they're not fantastic. So it does make you wonder. I suppose my first thought is, why are we going to buy from Chelsea at this stage if all the rumours are to be believed, and we want, we're putting in a bid for Declan Rice. We want Moses Caicedo, as do Chelsea. Why are we the ones that are going to give them money to maybe make a better bid for Caicedo? I'm not 100% sure. They're obviously hoping for money from United for Mason Mount, which seems to be cooling off. I think it's early days yet. I don't know how much we would offer for Kai Havertz. I don't know if he'd be a bargain at that price, but he's not somebody I've ever looked at when I've watched Chelsea and thought, I wish Arsenal had him.
Yeah, I mean, sorry to just correct myself from earlier. So he's scored 19 goals in 3 seasons. He's had 7 assists, and he's played best part of 100 and something games. So it's not exactly one of them. We all questioned Gabriel Jesus towards the end of the season, how prolific he was. Doesn't quite work for me. But I want to move on from Kai Havertz because at the moment it's just speculation. And I want to get your opinions. And I'll start with, I'll go back to Akhil. So concept, 1 in for next season. So just to give you some background, last week we had Johnny Cochran and Kaya Kanek on, and they went for Vlahovic as well. You can also choose these guys, and Ivan Toney as well. So a very striker-heavy focus. But Akhil, from your side, are you looking strikers as your? I can choose a player, and I'm making the assumption that we wouldn't want to choose Declan Rice because they're probably all going to go and buy him anyway, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's going to be a big rebuild in the centre of the park. Obviously, Granit Xhaka looks like he's moving on. And I wouldn't be surprised if Thomas Partey also moved on. So I do kind of expect 2 in there. And that hope, it could be Declan and Moses. It could be someone else. I don't know, obviously. But considering those can happen. I mean, it's funny because, you joked about Mbappe and somebody wrote on the chat that Mbappe is available. And technically, if a club like Man United are talking about Mbappe, then why shouldn't Arsenal? You could argue. Do I think Mbappe is going to end up at Arsenal? Probably not. But it's a case of we had a very good season last season. We eventually lost the league, but we challenged up there. We're back in Europe. We're back in the Champions League. So there's no reason why you can't shop in that bracket. But of course, you're looking at probably 300,000, 250,000 when our highest is around 200 with Bakayo now and stuff like that. So maybe slightly. Maybe just slightly kind of out of our reach. But I would go with the striker thing. I think it hit me a couple of times, and actually Ivan Toney was probably the player I would go for. Obviously, he's suspended at the moment and stuff like that. So, but someone in that mould, and I'll give 2 reasons why I say that. One was when we actually played Brentford. We obviously drew the game 1-1. It should have been. Well, we shouldn't have conceded because obviously VAR sort of didn't check the goal properly, or certainly didn't check the right part, so we shouldn't have conceded that. But if you remember that day, Ivan Toney was absolutely fantastic in the air. He did our centre backs. He won pretty much every header that I can remember, including for the goal. We got the assist, I think. And he just offered you something different. And then the second time I kind of thought about him again was Man City away, sitting in the away end in the middle tier. Obviously, watching kind of, it was, I don't want to be unfair to kind of Rob Holding, but obviously it was a slightly different game. Rob Holding played St. William Saliba, which then meant Haaland, instead of pushing on Saliba like he would have done, actually let Rob Holding free and just stuck on Thomas Partey, which basically meant we didn't have a pass out. So we went long. And when we went long, Diaz and Stones, and even though he was in midfield, but they absolutely killed Jesus in the air. And that just made me think again, if you had something a little bit different, if you had that Ivan Toney who can play in the air, but can also, is quite a baller, scores goals, an alternative to Gabriel Jesus and even Trossard, then he would be the sort of person. In a way, I sort of want like an Olivier Giroud kind of 10 years
it's
ago.
funny you say that. I was thinking that a minute ago.
I know that's weird, but I always used to say with Giroud, he has to be a option, not the option. And the problem with that was he was the option, and we didn't really have much else around. But if he was a option, it would have been so different. I think actually Toney could be that, that sort of that option, and could compete with Jesus. Competition's great. We're in Europe again. We need 2 players, so I would say Toney, but or someone in that mold. It doesn't have to be Toney. I don't really like giving names, but certainly a striker is where I'll be looking. So I think the midfield is going to be a rebuild regardless.
Yeah, I think we're making the assumption that by all the noises, it's Declan Rice that's coming in. I think the Toney one's an interesting one. Just before I go back to Merv, so I'm taking it from that sort of, from your perspective there, Axe. You're kind of thinking that we can probably just make do until we get to January then, because he can't even train, can he? So you don't see that as a challenge that from August to
No, I do.
January.
No, I do. I do. That's why I kind of say someone in that mould. I really like to give names because historically we've signed players. Even last year when Fabio Vieira turned up, you sort of thought, oh wow, okay, that forget jury's out on him. I appreciate that, but he popped up for 34 million, and you thought, oh wow, okay, where's he come from and who's he, kind of thing, sort of thing. So in a way that there could be a striker out there that could do could do a great job. I just don't know who that is. But in that Tony mould, in that way that they can score some goals, but they offer us something different, and they're very good in the air. Because when we need to change the game, we then can. At the moment, we probably can't. Jesus bring on Nketiah changes it slightly because Nketiah can sort of make his runs and it's a little bit quicker, but it doesn't change it in the air. So that's kind of what I mean. Yeah, could we hang on till January? Probably not. I would like to say actually we make the signing this summer and we go because you don't want to get to January 5 points behind and then suddenly think, if only we had started better. So I think you want to get it done in the summer.
Yeah, nice. Okay, Merv, bring you in on this one because I appreciate you might be itching to jump in here on who's your one in, who's your Mikel Arteta's giving you a blank piece of paper and you can pick somebody.
Okay. I would say I think like the two guys last week and like Akhil just now, Ivan Toney would have been on my list. He's not available till January, as you said. He can't even train, so he might be somebody for further down the line. I'm just give me a moment or two to kind of scene set here. We're up against a machine. I'm not that bothered about Newcastle, Liverpool, United. We need to chase down City. And we did really well last season, came up short. We know the reasons why, injuries. We're going to have, I think, a stronger squad this time round. The thing is, City aren't just a machine and a nation state funded. Erling Haaland is a machine. And he's a 35 goal a season striker. And the Premier League hasn't really had a 35 goal a season striker. And we don't have strikers like that. And we can maybe arrange things. Bukayo Saka might, hopefully we will play in a way that Bukayo Saka will score more, Gabriel Martinelli will score more, Gabriel Jesus might score more, Eddie Nketiah might come off the bench and score more, Reece Nelson. I have to say, we've probably got 2 years to win the Premier League because our young players are only extending for 2 years. So in 2 years' time, we're going to be back to only 2 years left on the contract for Bukayo Saka, for Gabriel Martinelli. And I'm conscious of the fact, having been through it many times with managers from Terry Neal to George Graham and even Arsene Wenger, that we sometimes we don't go for it. And, I don't want to start losing our star players. Now, I hate to say it, and I know I'm going to get shouted at in the comments. There is one Premier League striker who will get you 30 goals plus a season. He's only got a year left on his contract. To do that deal will probably be impossible because it's us, although we've all got the pictures on our phone of him wearing an Arsenal shirt when he was a kid. I'm sure that his current club would sell to anyone else. Interestingly, tonight also on Twitter, Manchester United apparently have called their interest. I think that might be the fact he's got 3 young kids with a fault on the way, and he probably isn't going to uproot them to Manchester. So I don't want to mention his name, but I think everybody knows who I mean. I don't think PG has said it. Yeah, I mean, why not? I think back. So give me a minute or two here, guys. I think back to the FA Cup semi-final in 2001, Old Trafford, when Sol Campbell got injured and went off, and we were like, "That's the end of that. He'll never play for Spurs again," because obviously he ran his contract down. And I said, "Well, he needs to come to us." And some of the guys I was with said, "No, we can't have him. He's a Spurs captain. We can't have him in our team." I said, "But we need, Tony Adams has only got a year or two left. We need that kind of a defender." And maybe old school, I'm used to people. Don't go there, Merv, says PG. Sorry, PG. I would take him. I would take him on the basis that he's he's only got 2-3 years left, and he wants trophies. He wants medals. Sorry, someone's just messaged me. They're listening to last week's. You said, "Why am I listening to Kevin Campbell? When are you on?" Okay, I'll have to message you
for Amanda's show on Monday night. I should give it a listen. Really good one.
I don't know. Amanda. He doesn't have the guts. How much does he want to win? He's England captain. He wants to win for. He's got a 2-year window to win a major trophy. I don't know. Having said that, assuming it can't be done, I'm happy with Tony. I think that the problem, I know Vlahovic, Osimhen, and obviously we've been linked with people who have come like Isaac and Gakpo and Nunez. Erling Haaland's a freak. I don't mean in a nasty way, but I mean, they come along once in a generation, a striker like that, I believe. This is our window, and we need a striker. We need to find goals, and so it's whoever we sign has to be somebody who can either score goals or has to be somebody who can help us create more. Now, whether that's Ødegaard, maybe stepping up a bit, and all of our strikers, all of our attacking players adding 4 or 5 more goals, it could be that.
Interesting. We won't dwell on he who shall not be named. It's Harry Kane. Come on, guys, we all know this.
Yeah.
Chat. But I do want Akhil, any sort of quick 1 minute, 2 minute before we go on to the one out on Harry Kane. Would you have him, or is it not a chance in hell for you?
Well, I just don't think we would ever get anywhere close to him. I think Sol was very different. It was on a free. It was a different era then as well. The social media side wasn't quite there, and all that kind of stuff. I just think it's a different world now, and I don't think Daniel Levy would sell to us. There's rumours that he's already said to Man United that he wouldn't sell to a Premier League rival. So I just can't see that deal ever happening. And if he turned up, would I be upset? Probably not, because he's a good player and he scores a lot of goals. But I just can't see it happening.
Yeah, as I said, I don't think it will happen. But you asked me who would I want, and I want a 30-goal a season striker.
Yeah, but the thing is, I think in this instance, you've saved Mikel Arteta's children, and he's granted you a wish. You've got to go over the other side of London and probably save Postecoglou's kids as well, Daniel Levy's kids, in order as well for us to get that one on. So we'll kick it on, actually, because we've got really interesting. I know we've only done two episodes, but really interesting that it's all been about strikers. It's not been about, do we need a right back? Not been about centre midfielders. But I guess a lot of us are probably thinking the Rice thing should be a done deal. So maybe as the weeks come on and we get more of these pods going, that it's worth views might change slightly. But let's move on to the second of our 3-part questions. So it's the one out. And back to you this time, Akhil. So, conversely, you get to pull the trigger on one player. So, any player in the squad, you would pull the trigger on. And as a man who had a maths teacher mum, please show your workings.
Okay, so I think there's a couple of players that we know are probably going to leave us. Kieran Tierney is one, which, by the way, on the last day of the season, I think when he sort of came past block 6, and I think he's a lot of the players have boxes up there and stuff. He actually got really emotional. There was a couple of tears in his eyes. Martin Ødegaard, as captain, actually went up to him and put his arm around him. So I think that basically told you that Kieran Tierney will probably move on, and it's a great shame, because I think when we looked at our squad, we looked at left back and thought that's actually where we've genuinely got 2 really, really good players, and how great is that? And we're probably going to lose one of them. But the player I would probably let go is Eddie Nketiah. Obviously, it always hurts when you kind of get rid of like one of your own, and he's certainly one of my own. And I sort of said the same with Joe Willock. I thought it was the right time for him to go. I thought it was the right time for Alex Iwobi to go when he went as well. But you sort of don't want to get rid of a homegrown player, but sometimes I think it's the right thing to do. So Eddie for me, he's always been a good player. He's shown, he is a good player. A couple of years ago when we sort of threw him in, scored 2 at Chelsea, and then he scored 2 again at home at Leeds. He ended the season really well. He signed the contract and stuff like that. So that was obviously his. But I think he kind of peaked for me then as well. I thought, when Jesus was injured, Eddie, was given a chance. He played well at times. That goal against West Ham was good. He scored against Brighton on New Year's Eve. He's done really well just after the World Cup, but then he started to fade away, and then he got injured, and then there was a time where he wasn't quite brought back quickly, and I think maybe Mikel even lost a little bit of faith in him. Trossard obviously came in, played up front sometimes. So for me, Nketiah is just not quite top level, and we are now top level. We are going to be playing against Europe's best, in a couple of months, and we're again one injury away from potentially Nketiah being our first choice, and no disrespect to the guy because he's a good player, as I said. I'm just not sure if he's, if we're going to win a league, I think we probably need to upgrade there. Flo Balogun's obviously an interesting one. You sort of talk about them together because they're similar age, come through the ranks, but with Flo, he obviously had a great season in France, and it's one for the club to make a judgment call. He's probably at peak value so far. If he stays, but he's only second or third choice, that value does go down regardless of his age. 1 year less on the contract, but the value goes down. So it's kind of a case of, do you sell them both? Do you sell one, keep one? But I would certainly be looking to, as we said, buy a striker in. And the fact that we've all said that in the last question kind of means, well, Eddie Nketiah probably does drop down one, and I'm not sure he would be happy with that. So he would probably be the one that I would sell. Obviously, there are others in potentially Cedric and Tavares and Pepe and people like that, Mari, that are coming back from loan. But I think the one that probably is a bit of an asset would be Eddie Nketiah.
Yeah, do you know, I'm sort of agree. I agreed with the guys last week. I agree with you too. I feel like we're gonna. Well, we had Kaya saying Eddie and Johnny saying Rob Holding, which was interesting. So the Nketiah one I find interesting because he's on, if rumours to be believed, a lot of money, and so therefore does that make him more difficult to sell? He's English, and so if you can find a market for it, then you can probably get decent money for it. And if that means that we can then fund the upgrade in striker, which it sounds like most Arsenal fans need, then it sort of makes sense. And we need to make assumptions that Cedric, Tierney, Tavares, they're all going to go anyway. So if you have in this hypothetical world the opportunity to force a transfer, then that sort of thing makes sense. Merv, from your side, who do you pick as your one out?
Well, I think if I go back one step, I think Eddie could be part of the make weight in the deal I was inferring before. But who would be my out? I've got to be honest, I'm not sure on Fabio Vieira. I know we haven't seen a lot of him, but I think that historically, we've possibly been a side where, 8 or 9 of our players are top quality, and there's 1 or 2 who are getting there, but not quite there. And again, if we're going to hunt down City, we need 15 players who are all at it. And I guess I don't know. I've seen enough. I know 1 or 2 are saying Vieira in the comments. From what I'm trying not to look at the comments that have put me off. I think that possibly, given the money we paid for him. I mean, I also think, for example, Albert Sambi Lokonga probably isn't going to make it. But then I think he's probably, most of us don't necessarily have considered him part of the squad because he had the loan and everything. So I think that also depending on who comes in. I know you said that we're all going for strikers, but I'd be quite keen on Cancelo if we can do it. I always thought he was a great player, and he was always in my fantasy football team, and he always scored a lot of points. So it might be a bit like Zinchenko. We are, I suppose we are bringing in defenders who are stepping into midfield, and therefore it might be that maybe it's right to let Vieira go. Emil Smith-Rowe, I think, it looks like the club obviously retaining him and investing in him.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Fabio Vieira. I actually am not willing to throw in the towel on him like quite a few fans, because I feel like I've seen some glimpses of a technically very assured player. I know it was only an isolated incident, but that away game at Brighton, he came in as if, he was an identical replica for what Martin Odegaard can deliver. And I also think, he's coming. He was
I think you mean
21 years old. Go on.
You mean Brentford?
Brentford, yeah, Brentford. Yeah, he's come in 21 years old. He's come to a new league. It's a physical league. It's a much more demanding league than the Portuguese Super League, I think they call it. My view is that we need to have a little see for maybe this one season remaining. But Akhil, I don't know if you've got any sort of final thoughts on Vieira before we move into the bangs section.
Yeah, I think I would always sort of obviously Mikel and Edu saw something in him to spend the money. It was one of the deals that was done pretty quickly. It was done quietly, so I think they were quite proud and happy to get him in. So I think we'll see more of him. We're obviously in Europe. I'm going to be interested to see how he does in the Champions League as well. Certain games might suit him better there, even though it is a higher standard of opposition. But yeah, I certainly wouldn't throw in the towel yet. But then saying that, it's one of those where if a club absolutely needs a player like that and comes in with a bid that you can't refuse, then obviously you probably would say you would let him go. But I can't see his value being higher than what we paid for him, because he didn't quite have the season we hoped. So considering his value is probably less than what we paid, would I want to sell him and lose money? Probably not. Not yet, anyway.
No. Yeah, we've got at least another year of testing it out before we then start to say, things like the Nicolas Pepe. Oh, we're gonna have to make a big loss on them. I just feel like, there's more to go from that side. All right, let's move to our final of the three big questions for this particular podcast. Then we'll get into some questions right towards the end, and that is Akhil. I'll go back to you on this one. One to bang next season. So, your predictions on one player that you think will go either supernova, because they're already brilliant, and let's face it, there's loads of those from the season we've just had, or maybe it is somebody like a Fabio Vieira could really surprise us all, but not that I want to be leading the witness, so your call.
That's tough one, isn't it? I mean, if this time last year someone had said Granit Xhaka, you would have probably thought that guy's weird, or he's smoking the funny stuff. It's really you could literally say anyone. You could literally say, from the Sakas, because I think Martinelli and Saka will score 20 goals each this season. I think they're going to have tremendous years. I've always been a fan of Martin Odegaard. I'm not going to go through the whole team, but but I'm going to go for William Saliba. I think he is, great news that he's close to signing the contract and stuff like that. I think that's a real big one. I remember again at the end of the season, sort of watching him walk around, and he had a couple of friends with him. All look really young. His friend, I mean, he's only 21 himself, right? But his friends look 21, whereas he just looked like this giant near them. And I just thought, the guy's got so much presence, so much class, Rolls Royce of a defender. We really must keep him. And I think he had a fantastic season. I think if we all had one regret, or if we could go back in a time machine, it will probably be that he doesn't play against Sporting Lisbon at home in that Europa League game. So his back kind of, stays with us, and he can continue playing. So I think it's going to be William Saliba. I just think he's going to have him and Gabriel were really developing really well. We're developing a good partnership. There was no kind of, when Saliba went out the team as well, you sort of saw that Ben White potentially dropped a bit of form as well and stuff like that. So it kind of impacted a lot. So I would say he's going to be the one. This time next year, we're going to look at him and think, wow, he is probably going to be the best defender in the league. If not in Europe. That does bring its problems, because then you've got the likes of Madrid and Barcelona and PSG probably, wanting to buy him. But obviously that's a good problem to have. So William Saliba is the one I would say.
Do you know what? I've read a few articles. I've listened to a few of the other really good Arsenal podcasts out there talking about how that was potentially one of the signings of the summer. And that's the one that I've been nervous about for about 18 months. Because after the Marseille, and I even got more nervous after about 6 or 7 games at the beginning of the season we've just had, because I thought to myself, he looks immense, and at the end of the season we've got 1 year left on his deal, and you just know those big clubs are going to be sniffing. So to get that signed up, I think us doing so well, him playing so much football, and also the fact that we are in the Champions League and so competitive, I think that's made a big difference. But yeah, I think that's a really, really smart choice.
Also on him, he hasn't quite got that connection with Arsenal yet. Even though he's potentially been a player for 3-4 years, he obviously was on loan a lot. There was rumours that he wasn't quite happy the way he was treated. He was, if we all remember those Instagram days with Matteo Guendouzi, he was sort of, pals with him, and it just wasn't quite there. But I was kind of told, obviously, with my role, I'm lucky enough to talk to people at Arsenal and stuff, and I know he was really kind of surprised at how quickly fans took to him. He even knows his song started at Bournemouth away. He absolutely loved it. Final day of the season, when it was going round, people were singing this song, and he clapped everyone. He really, I think, felt loved at Arsenal very quickly. So I got to say, credit to the fans there, because I think actually, sometimes. I think Adrian Clark was talking about this as well on one of the podcasts, that actually it does make a difference if the fans, really take to you. And I think the fans have got to take, they've played a part in Saliba signing as well. As silly as it sounds, 'cause of course, money and trophies and ambition is what it's going to take. But having fans sing your name that quickly and being loved, I think actually that's what Saliba needed. He's gone through a lot of personal stuff as well in the last few years. I just think he needed a bit of love, and Arsenal fans showed that. So I think we should definitely continue that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I really like that idea of everyone's helped to contribute towards the loving, the fans, the club, his fellow teammates, maybe the manager. After a lot of people, maybe there was a bit of friction there, so that's good. Merv, from your point of view, one to bang, and if you want to, you can also you can big up Saliba if you like.
Well, yes, Saliba was my one to bang as well.
Well, then we can
I think.
Saliba for the bang. You go.
Yeah,
for it.
no, I think he's a tremendous prospect. I think we are looking at potentially one one of the top defenders in Premier League, probably in Europe over the next 2 to 3 years. I think everything he's done, and I think one of the things was right is that loaning him back and not, we spent a lot of money on him as like an 18, 19-year-old. So there was obviously something we saw there, and we got in quick. And I think that to loan him back to France, if we'd have put him out on loan to a championship side or something, he wouldn't have made the progress he has. But I think he felt comfortable there. And we love him. He knows the love is there. We look a different team when he's there, just so much more confident playing out from the back. As you said, Ben White dropped off a bit. He has a big impact on everybody around him. I think that, so he's mine, but obviously I need to come up with someone else. I know it's a bit cheeky to say, but I think if he signs, I think we'll be saying Declan Rice, our player of the season. I have a lot, and I know I've got friends who say, how do you know he's that good? We haven't seen him week in, week out. I just see him playing for England. I see him mature, considering he's 24. And I think he's one of those who could run the midfield for the next 5-6 years. I also think Martin Ødegaard is a very, very special talent. And he dropped off
one to
a
bang,
little
Merv,
bit.
not choose the entire team.
Well, no. I'm trying to. Okay. So because I can't have Saliba, I'm saying if Declan Rice comes, he'll bang. But if I can't have Declan Rice because he's not there yet, Martin Ødegaard.
That is a really cheeky way of getting in 3 separate players.
Well, why not? Why not? Why not?
I do love your creativity, mate. I do love your creativity. We are almost out of time. If you want to ask any sort of final questions, please pop them in the chat. But there has been a couple of questions asked. It's some Akhil specific questions, mate. So how did the FaceTime with Martin Ødegaard come about? And then the FaceTime on the train back from Newcastle. What's all that about?
It was. I'm still getting people coming to me saying I was in that carriage, or I was in the carriage after, and I came down, and the journey was epic and stuff. And I got to say it was. So I work in PR. I work in social media. I have a day job outside of football, but I do a bit of consultation in football. So I know Martin's team a little bit. Done a little bit of work with them as well. Done a bit of consulting and stuff like that. And players at the moment, they're all. They've all got their own kind of PR agencies. They're all trying to, it's about being the right profile of player as well. I know that sort of Martin Odegaard's he takes his role very seriously as captain. He really wants to know he wants to really understand what it means to be a captain. He wants to do the right things. There was an interview that when Tony Adams interviewed him for one of the TV channels, Martin Odegaard was really nervous. He was captain of Arsenal, but he was really nervous because Tony Adams was going to be the one interviewing him. And he really wanted to learn from Tony. I know either before or after the interview, he spent a bit of time with Tony Adams talking to him and just really understanding what it means to be, an Arsenal captain. I'm sure Tony Adams should have told him exactly what it means, because who better than Tony Adams to tell you, what it means. He's done a lot more than other captains. I think a certain striker at Chelsea at the moment who can't get a game, which is why they're playing Havertz up front, because their actual striker is not very good. He kind of, he wasn't really interested in being a captain. I remember when Arsenal used to do the Foundation Ball, which was a charity event at the end of the year. For the Arsenal Foundation, and one of the years Aubameyang was there, he didn't turn up. Apparently he was unwell or something like that. But it was all a bit fishy. But with Martin, he's really keen to kind of do things right. When the stadium was when Arsenal sort of announced the stadium design and showed the designs for the first time, there was an event that was done in Angel, and again, they put it to Martin Odegaard, I think a couple of days before that, would you like to come to this? And he this is where he consults with his team and says, I'm quite keen to go. What do you guys think? And obviously everyone thought it was a good idea. He came to the event. He was there for a good hour. He spoke to lots of fans. He kind of, I was one of them. He wanted to know about the Arsenal Supporters Trust. He wanted to know loads of things. It was just before Spurs away as well. So there was a lot of excitement in the room anyway. So it's just a case of, I pitched the idea sort of on the day, because you don't do these things in advance because you don't know what the result's going to be. And obviously, we sort of knew we weren't going to win the league then. We maybe had a very outside chance, but it was such a great performance from Martin from Arsenal. He'd scored a great goal. So I kind of pitched it to him and said, this was after a few beers. I must admit, Newcastle was a long, long way away. So it's a lot of beer time. And it was just a case of, there's a bunch of fans here on the train that absolutely adore you and kind of want to show their appreciation. One thing I know he has said is he really wants a song. So that's a bit of a challenge to all those kind of Arsenal fans who like to make songs and like to sing songs and like to put them on Twitter and stuff like that. That Martin Odegaard really wants a song, and there was a couple in the train and the carriage sung to him that kind of potentially may get going next season. But yeah, it was a bit of an opportunity which he loved. I can assure you he didn't do it for PR. He kind of did it because I asked nicely and I said please. And yeah, he really enjoyed it. And obviously it's talking kind of to him and the team afterwards, it was a case of that 5 minutes from Martin Odegaard, that people, the 50, 60, 70 people on that train will never forget that moment. And just 5 minutes from the Arsenal captain has not changed people's lives, that's dramatic, but it's given everyone, including myself, a memory that we'll never forget. So yeah, no, fair play to Martin, and I've certainly got a soft spot for him, and hope he does really well next season.
I mean, he is the typical perfect representative for a football club. Your examples there, we won't dwell on the Aubameyang stuff, but your examples there show the night and day difference, and you can tell that in the way that he's just embraced everything about the club. And when you see and hear things like this, these stories like this, that you actually start to realize when their rumors were surfacing just before he became captain, or who's going to get the captain's armband, and people talking about Odegaard, and inside the club, obviously London Colney, they're probably all seeing this all the time and thinking, of course, he'd be absolutely perfect. But we only see a part of that sort of player. But it's seen it since he's become captain. We've really seen that sort of difference come out, and it's really good to see. I love him to bits. When during the normal season when we do the post-match shows, it's usually me waxing lyrical about them, as Amanda and Cookie would say. But it's he certainly is an exemplary footballer and a model professional, and that's fantastic to see.
Yeah. I think what will be interesting, and it's probably a test of his captaincy next year, with how he does with that Granit Xhaka there. Because I mean, even if sort of watch games on TV or you're lucky enough to be in the stadium, you'll always see that Odegaard's the sort of lead by example. Wants the ball and stuff like that. He does get the fans going a lot. He's always going like that to the fans and clapping, but it's before the game. It's Granit Xhaka who's doing the bit of the team talk in the circle. It's Granit Xhaka who's often kind of the one really vocal. If you remember Bournemouth at home, we all remember it for the Reece Nelson goal, but I also remember it because Granit Xhaka and Jorginho were warming up, and they were both like coaches. They were actually coaching the team and really giving them that encouragement to keep going, sort of thing. So it's gonna be a test for Martin. I think he knows that as well. He's still very young, but he is captain of his country. He captains Haaland, for example. That's a big personality. So I'm sure he'll take it with two hands. But it's just something to be, something to watch and something that's quite interesting.
Yeah, certainly. We love Martin Odegaard, the takeaway that everyone in the comments and listening to this should take from it. Listen, we are out of time for today. Really, really interesting chat with the two gentlemen. It would be remiss of me, and I get told off by Amanda if I don't mention that on Monday we have got another guest coming along, Carlo Garganese, who is editor, broadcaster and writer. He does Italian and English football. And he's also on the Italian Football Pod. So he'll be a really interesting one to chat about all things going on in that space. So we're going to get him on, chat, ask him a few questions. So if you want to join us, please make sure that you tune in for that on Monday night. But as I said, we are out of time for one in, one out, and one bangs for today. My thanks very much to Merv for joining us. Thank you very much, Merv.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and Akhil, as always, lovely to have you on, mate.
Oh, enjoyed it. It was really good. It's the first one I've done for a while. It's nice to talk Arsenal after a few weeks. So yeah, it's great.
Well, we'll get you on again.
The comments as well. The comments were lovely as well. Feels like a real community here, which is great.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much to everyone who's been in the chat. And we will see you next time on the Same Old Arsenal podcast. Bye-bye.